Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Dr. Willie Maxwell for another episode of Bring the Smoke, and I'm here with my favorite congressman, Congressman Bobby Scott. My goodness, he does so much in the community, and he's been a champion for our community and everybody's community. I don't care what's going on, I always see him. I joke with him and say, man, him and the Holy Ghost the same. He the Holy Ghost, because I don't care where you go, Congressman Bobby Scott gonna be there. If it's some small church's barbecue or somebody celebrating a birthday, if he can make it, he'll be there. I mean, I see him sometimes more than I see some of my local politicians in places in our local community. So for him to be stationed in DC and still take the time to be on this show and be with so many different people, that's a testament that he's not a politician, he's a public servant. So we just thank God that we have Congressman Bobby Scott here. And what's going on? 'Cause I know you running again, so I always got to make sure I can help you as much as I can, even though he don't need no help. People don't want to run against Bobby Scott unless they get paid off to do it. You understand? I'm not going to embarrass myself, and don't embarrass yourself. Leave Congressman Scott alone because he's called by God, and I'm telling you, he serves our community well. Anyway, what's
Dr.
going on,
Maxwell,
sir?
it's good to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for being here. So I know it's time to run again. I don't know anyone running against you.
I have opposition. I had additional opposition, but she withdrew from the race.
Sound like a smart thing to do. I know I should say that, but hey. But I wanted you on here because you are not only a great public servant, but you are a historian. And so many people get upset at me, sometimes for being a preacher, because I support the Democratic ticket a lot of times, most of the time, 99.9% of the time. And so I support the Democrats, and they say, oh, you shouldn't support the Democrats because they support homosexuality and things of that nature. But my thing is, if God gives you free will, who am I to tell you what you can and cannot do? It's up to the churches to do what they feel that God is leading them to do, but it's up to public policy to give people, to allow them to exercise their rights. So can you just let us know, the stance of the Democratic Committee in so many different issues, and why do you, as a politician, public servant, why do you choose the Democratic Party?
Well, you mentioned several issues, but the main thing is the position on civil rights has been a defining issue for Democrats for generations. In fact, that's how the Republican Party really established itself, the modern Republican Party. When I was elected to the House of Delegates in 1977, first session of 78, there were 80 Democrats out of 100. And gradually, Democrats left the Democratic Party to join the Republican Party over basically one issue: civil rights. They made Richard Nixon in '72, the Southern strategy was to appeal to Democrats that were not comfortable with the civil rights agenda and attracted them to the Republican Party. And it worked. Gradually, over the years, Southern Democrats slowly evolved into the Republican Party to the point where the Republican Party built itself up to where it is now in the South, an overwhelming portion of the electorate. And that is because they attracted people on the issue of opposing civil rights. Now, I support civil rights, and you can't support civil rights just for yourself. Either everybody has civil rights or nobody has civil rights.
Exactly.
And so if you have groups that people want to discriminate against, you got to protect them. There's an old saying after World War II, when they came after the socialists, I didn't complain because I wasn't a socialist. When they came after the labor unions, I didn't complain because I didn't belong to a union. When they came after the Jews, I didn't complain because I wasn't Jewish. But when they came after me, there was nobody left to complain.
Right.
You got to start complaining at the first go-round. And so if there are groups, you may favor them or may not, but you can't allow anyone to be discriminated against. And so if people want to say, well, I'd like to discriminate against that group, well, maybe you belong on the Republican side. But don't be surprised when you lose your own civil rights.
Wow. Exactly. King would say, what injustice anywhere is a threat everywhere. So I like the history you've given us. So a lot of people say, well, the Republican Party freed you. They're the one that freed slaves. And so you're saying that over the years, they transitioned from dealing with civil rights to dealing with to becoming a racist party of Democrats who were disgruntled about the different laws that was going on in the South.
I think it was a 48 National Convention, Hubert Humphrey made a civil rights speech, made a lot of the Southern Democrats mad, and gradually the real turning point was the Voting Rights Act. When Congress passed the Voting Rights Act and the Democratic President, Lyndon Johnson, signed it, he is rumored to say that we've lost the South for a generation, because people will see this, that blacks can now vote, and Southern Democrats will ooze over to the Republican Party because they didn't like the fact that he signed the Voting Rights Act. And that's where the Republican Party came from. It's gradual. When I was elected to Congress in '92, there was still a lot of Southern white Democrats. And now there are very few Southern white Democrats. There are black districts created under the Voting Rights Act, but just about everybody else are white Republicans. We're picking up seats because they're drawn districts a little more fairly. They're drawing a second district that blacks have an opportunity to win in Alabama, another district in Louisiana. We're fighting in Florida, where they just eliminated a district. But by and large, the Republican Party today was built on attracting conservative Democrats who opposed civil rights into their party. So when they try to suggest that they are a civil rights party, no, they were built on the policy of opposition to civil rights.
So they want to go back to Lincoln when they freed the slaves, but they haven't been that way in quite some time, is what you're saying.
Republicans back, if we were voting in 1865 or maybe even 1930s, maybe a Republican vote would have been a correct vote. But we're voting in 2024.
Yes, and speaking of racism and civil rights, one of the things that a lot of us are concerned about, and some people don't feel is real, and I know former President Trump continues to say that, he has no part of it, but how concerned should we be as minorities or blacks or whoever may be in the minority about this Project 2025?
Well, I think if you it's a long document, it's about 900 pages, but you got to start off with why it even exists. When Trump was first elected president, I think it's fair to say that he didn't expect to win. And so he wasn't ready. So he came in an office and didn't have policies ready to go, didn't have personnel ready in place. And so by the time he got his act together, they'd lost the House. Nancy Pelosi was Speaker of the House. And then by the time he got his act together, he couldn't get anything passed over her objection. They're not going to make that mistake again. They have written down what they want to do. And the first is to consolidate power so you can just get things done without the normal problems of the democratic process. Mm-hmm. That's why he says he's going to be dictator on day one. Now, I remind people, I have yet to see in history anybody who's dictator on day one who wasn't dictator on day two, on three, right, and four. And so you consolidate the power there. You consolidate a lot of power in the Supreme Court since they have a 6-3 reliable majority. Mm-hmm. And the Chevron decision, which gave the courts the obligation to defer to agency expertise in regulations, they cut that out. You don't have to defer to their expertise. You can make your own decisions. So if there's a decision that you didn't like, you don't have to defer to anybody. The courts, Supreme Court being the top, and if you appeal it, that's who's going to make the final decision, will make the final decision. And so you've consolidated the power between the president and a Supreme Court that you have control over. The next, you've got to get the executive branch responsive to dictates from the president. Right now, one of the problems he had before was when he ordered people to do something, civil servants who had civil service protection wouldn't do it. It was wrong. Yeah. So they wouldn't do it. What he wants to do is eliminate their protection. So you don't do what I say. I don't know if you can be doing your job properly and thought you had protections. I'm going to fire you. Put somebody in there like Marjorie Taylor Greene. They'll just do what I say. Wow. And so if you get rid of civil service protections, then you can execute your policy and won't have any resistance. That's what they want to do and what Project 2025 starts off. The next thing they do is adopt the policy that they want to adopt. And if you just look at the policies, I think the reason that Trump himself is backing off from it, it is just so shocking in an extreme way that they want to go about doing things that he doesn't want to have to explain it. Of course, he's a little trapped because you go back through history, he was praising it. He was praising the people that wrote it. His appointees wrote it. His vice president is his vice presidential nominee is all over it. Mm-hmm. So, you can say you don't know what it is, but he lies. And it's
right.
all his.
Yes.
And that's their agenda. Let's take education policy. Mm-hmm. I'm the lead Democrat on the Education and Workforce Committee, so that's one of the first places I looked. What's their education policy? Number one, abolish the Department of Education. Then get rid of Head Start. Then get rid of Title I funding. Now, Title I funding, we fund public schools basically with the real estate tax, which means there's always going to be a disparity between the rich areas and the lower income areas. What Title I money does is funds local schools based on a formula primarily based on poverty. So the low-income areas get most of the money, wealthy areas get very little. What he wants to do is get rid of Title I. Right. Wow. So you're back to the disparities. School lunches, back off on school lunches. Those are the kind of things that education policy. Student loan forgiveness programs, wants to get rid of all of them. You got a student loan, there's no way to work it off with the public service loan forgiveness or a income-based for so many years and then you're discharged. No, you got a student loan, you're paid a student loan, period. No way to work it off, no way to pay for a number of years and get it discharged. No way if you were defrauded like Trump University, no way you still have to pay your loans. Wow. Right now the law is, and he didn't implement it, Biden has implemented, if a school closes and has defrauded people, you don't have to pay the student loan. Yeah. That's just the education part, workforce part, a couple of things in there like losing your overtime, harder to form a union, sabotaging child labor laws. I mean, that's just the education part. And they go through the entire government. One of the criminal justice provisions is to dissolve what are called dissent decrees. When the Department of Justice goes in and finds that your police department has been violating people's civil rights, they'll negotiate a settlement and say, okay, this is what you're going to do to fix the situation. And the agreement, you consent to the agreement, and then you turn it over to the court and have the court order you to do what you've agreed to. So if you don't, you're in violation of a court order. You're in contempt of court if you're not doing what you said you're going to do. Wow. Rather than if you don't have that backing, you just didn't do what you said you were going to do. And Department of Justice, I guess, has to start all over. But by having a consent decree, you give the power of the court to enforce what you agreed to. Now, people say that the Department of Justice has imposed this. He hasn't imposed anything. You've agreed to it. Now, of course, you're somewhat coerced because a lawsuit is pending. If you don't agree to it, then they can proceed with the court and the judge can order you to do certain things. Sometimes you're better off designing your own program, right, and then agreeing to it. And that's the consent decree. What he wants to do is get rid of them, so they don't have to abide by what they already agreed to. I mean, you go through the entire list, the environment, they want to essentially deregulate the environment, get rid of the EPA to begin with. So they know they want to end the war against fossil fuels, which means end the war against climate change. I mean, the document is just shocking, and that's why Trump is running away from it, because I don't know what, they didn't think we were going to read it. We read it. And we know what it says, we know what they're going to do, and we don't like it one bit.
Wow. That's you want to get rid of checks and balances. So basically, wow.
Well, and I was at a group earlier today, federal workers, explaining to them, and they were asking questions along the same lines. What do you do about, how do you protect civil servants' protections? And he said, can you pass a law to kind of lock it in? And I said, well, you couldn't get it past the Republican House and pass a filibuster in the Senate. The election will decide it. And if Trump wins, he's going to try to impose it. If he loses, the whole thing will dissolve as a nothing. So elections have consequences.
Man, I know every year, every time we vote, we always say this is the most important election. Well, people say it. This is my first time saying it, period, in my whole life. This is important because I believe we're not just voting for a president, we're voting for democracy. Because if the plan goes the way he wants it, to me, which he just said, he want to be a dictator and do whatever it is he wants to do and use the judicial service, the Supreme Court, to do whatever he wants. And he's the one that kind of stacked up the judicial branch with the judges that he picked, which of course each party can do it, but I don't think we've ever seen it in our history where a president is really trying to be a dictator. Now, when I vote, and that's why it's such a polar difference when I talk about Trump and anybody else. You know, Reagan won, and if Bush won, and different Republicans won, I was hurt that certain presidents didn't win that I voted for, but I don't think I was as concerned as I am. I know I wasn't concerned as I am with Trump. So what can we do on the ground to help make sure? I know we have to do voting. I know we have to do those things, but do you think we need to educate them more about Project 2025, or more so continue to just push those individuals to vote, or do we need a two-pronged?
When you say it's the most important in our lifetime, it's because the consequence of the election.
Yes.
Put us in, and usually if you elect one, you go one way, you elect another, you go another way. The difference, I mean, you've got one party campaigning on turning the clock back.
Yeah.
Make America great again. Again like when?
Yes.
Well, we know it's again like before 1970s because they got rid of Roe v. Wade. We know it's before the 1960s because they don't like the Voting Rights Act. Trump appointed dozens of judges that, when asked, would not say whether or not Brown v. Board of Education was properly decided. So they want to go back before 1954. Exactly how far back do they want to turn the clock?
Right.
But we know they're campaigning on a slogan to turn the clock back. Now, one of the consequences, you mentioned the Supreme Court. They have a 6-3 majority. That 6-3 majority has sabotaged voting rights, sabotage discrimination laws, took away the student loan assistance. I mean, that's just all in one couple of weeks. They did all that. Time and time again, they've been on the wrong side. Reverse Roe v. Wade. I mean, all the decisions have been extreme, and it's getting more extreme. And the question is, what can you do about that? Well, it depends on the election. If you assume judges will leave the court around 80 years old, Alito and Thomas are in their 70s. So we're kind of stuck with them probably through the next 4-year term. If Kamala Harris is elected and re-elected in her second term, one or both of those seats should be up. and that would give us an opportunity to flip 6-3 into 5-4 our way, if we can elect and re-elect Kamala Harris. On the other hand, if you elect Donald Trump, first thing that happens is Alito and Thomas will resign and be replaced by somebody in their 40s.
Right.
So you've reset the clock. They've got 3 people under 60, which means they got more than 20 years before they get to 80. So if Trump is elected, you'll have 5 justices, conservative, doing this kind of stuff for the next 20 years. That's 5 consecutive presidential elections. If you lose one, then you reset the clock again.
Right.
So all of our rights are at stake. And what they've done to the Voting Rights Act, not just eliminate preclearance, which was the major part of where they can't institute a voting change that's discriminatory without permission of the Justice Department. Burden of proof to show it's not discriminatory is on the state, not the victims. They threw that out. Now they're showing it virtually impossible to prove that you've even got a case because you got to show intent. Just because you've been discriminated against, you can show, well, this is unfair to blacks. Well, that's not enough. You got to show they intended for it not to be fair to blacks. And they can say, because they've given permission on this, no, we were being partisan. We're being unfair to Democrats. That was our purpose. And the fact it's unfair to blacks was not our purpose. It just, just happened. Mm. Well, they can pass discriminatory laws unless you can prove that they intended it be discriminated based on race, not on party. Everybody knows that there's a huge overlap between party and race. And so if they're going after Democrats and having an unfair plan for Democrats, it's going to be unfair for African Americans. And they actually approved of that. I mean, these are the kind of cases this court is doing. And if we don't win this election, we're going to be locked in for the next 20 years.
That's why I love you. That's why I don't like Democrats and Republicans as far as the two parties. The Bible says, how can a house divided amongst itself stand? I just wish we had one party, Americans, and people just did the right thing, because so many times people vote on their party and not what's right. And a lot of times, I would say the majority of the time, is Republicans, to me, usurping the rights of people in order to gain political.
Well, you have a Republican Party that was formed on the platform of opposition to civil rights.
Yes.
So, I mean, you talk about affirmative action, which is in college admissions didn't do anything but offset discrimination. Yeah. You had discriminatory tests. You got people who were subject to a discriminatory K through 12 education. You got legacy. You got rich people make donations to college, get in. All of that was discrimination. But if you got affirmative action, it evens it out, no harm, no foul.
Right.
You got rid of affirmative action, all you got is discrimination. And they didn't have a problem with all the other discrimination. They just had problem with balancing it out. This is the kind of decision that the Supreme Court is making, and that we're going to be stuck with for 20 years if we don't win this election. And they're using the same rationale to go after minority business, go after black farmers' relief, even the Fearless Fund, capital for black women.
Yes.
They're going after that. The 8A program to help minorities go into business. They're getting rid of all of those, using the same rationale. And it's been close to being all the other way. Al Gore only lost because butterfly ballot and a split vote in independents running. He could have won Florida. That would have put him, he would have had 2 appointments. Hillary Clinton could have gotten those 3 appointments rather than Trump. And you got to remember, I mean, all these decisions on affirmative action where you can use races a little bit, but not too much. Straight up quotas had 4 votes starting in 1978. Bakke was decided where they said, well, you can't have quotas, but you can have, affirmative action a little bit. We had 4 votes for quotas. Croson, which is a Richmond case, building the jail, 30% set aside for minority vendors, 50% city. They said you could have the bill that the city council passed said we're going to have 30% of the business opportunities for minorities. That was set aside on a 5-4 vote. I mean, we could make significant progress using the court with just 2 more votes.
Wow.
And we've had the opportunity going through all the way through these close elections. And this election, if we don't win it, they'll lock in 20 more years.
I had a quick question. I don't know if there's a controversy question, if you can answer it or not. Because I really didn't ever grasp the whole understanding of it. So at one point when Obama was in office, did he have a chance to appoint someone and waited? Like what happened with I thought he had an opportunity to appoint a judge at one point.
He didn't wait. He appointed Merrick Garland.
Oh, he did?
As,
okay.
Well, he had another opportunity that he didn't take.
Right, that's the
But
one
he
I'm talking
appointed Merrick Garland, and the Senate, Scalia died, I think it was February, and they did not even dignify the appointment with a hearing and just let it ride because they said we don't confirm judges in an election year.
Yeah, so that's
4 years later, during an election year, Justice Ginsburg died, and they appointed Amy Coney Barrett, lickety split. I mean, in a couple of weeks. They just stonewalled it. Now, what he could have done, Scalia died in what's called a recess. He could have had a recess appointment, and the appointment would have been on bench for the rest of the year. That is an extreme process to take.
Gotcha.
You like to go by regular process. And frankly, I don't believe that he believed that McConnell could get a unanimous Republican caucus to agree not even to have a hearing on a Supreme Court appointment. I mean, that is so far out of bounds that I think most people would not have believed it. In fact, a couple of Republicans were quoted early in the process. Of course, we're going to have hearings. We'll treat it like the regular process. We may not vote for them, but we'll have a process. And then when it came push come to shove, none of them would budge, and McConnell rode out the clock. I think if Obama had believed him, he could have appointed somebody, and they would have been on the court, and that would have been a 5th vote. For the rest of the year, all those bad decisions would have been 5-4 our way.
Wow. Yeah. I was just wondering. Thank you for that answer, because I was struggling with that one. And sometimes I just feel like, I know we try to stay above board, but sometimes
it was unprecedented.
Yeah.
He said we never have, it just makes stuff up, never confirm justices during an election year. First of all, justices rarely retire during an election year because of the controversy it would cause. Exactly. And when they die during an election year, they are replaced. Right. Justice Kennedy was sitting up on the court. He was confirmed in an election year.
Right.
So, I mean, they just made it up, and it wasn't even true.
So we couldn't just push through that, or
we could have, if we had made the appointment during the 2-week recess, that would have been right after the vacancy occurred. But that would have been extreme. That would have been provocative. That would have essentially eliminated any goodwill between the president and the Senate. But if that's how they're going to do, then that's what we have to do. I think, looking back, should have called McConnell in and said, "Look, Buster, you going to hold a hearing or not?"
But I'm just saying,
and if he said not,
right,
before McConnell got back to the Bush's office, he could have marched somebody down to the Supreme Court with a certificate saying, I'm on the Supreme Court.
I know, I'm just saying
And
that
they would
what
have been there.
Republicans do that. I'm just saying, like,
We
when
coulda-
are
we
we
coulda
gonna
done-
kind of switch up some stuff? That's
Well,
all I'm saying.
Well, we know now.
Yeah,
We know now.
we knew that a
But
minute
that
ago.
was so extreme
Yeah,
and so out of bounds.
I know what you mean. I got you.
That nobody could believe. Now, okay, part of the problem is our problem because, like I said, nobody thought Trump was going to win.
Right.
And so our attitude was, don't confirm him then. Hillary's going to win,
Right, exactly.
and she's going to appoint somebody better.
Right, exactly.
So don't appoint,
Right.
don't do
I get it,
anything.
I
So
get
we
it.
didn't put any pressure on him.
Right. Man, I'm sorry. I had to take a moment of silence on that one. But yes, I thank you for your transparency because I was just struggling with why we didn't do it, especially when they did it. But, anyway. But back to this. You were one of the first people to support In Touch. And I'm just thinking about it because we had to move the sign to make sure we have my for-profit business behind you. And I'm just thinking about when we first was sending supplies to, what was it, Flint, Michigan. I mean, Congressman Scott was right here. I mean, he was right here loading water up, you understand? So, I mean, that's why I love him so much. And because of the local funding for In Touch, we were able to send our first time actually doing it, we sent 2 18-wheelers full of supplies. And we had the truck filled up so much we was beyond what we were supposed to because we didn't know it was a limit. So we filled the water. I think it was like 10,000 pounds above the limit on both trucks. But because the nation knew what was going on, because when you pull a Congressman Scott in, the nation knew what was going on. They sent us messages saying, hey, we letting these trucks go through, but don't you do this again. and so we thought we could just fill the trucks up. And so we didn't know anything about a limit. They let those trucks go all the way from Newport News all the way to Flint, Michigan without touching it. And I just believe some of it because when you connect it, he ain't make a call or anything. Well, at least I don't think it is. But they let those trucks go through. And I believe because when you have images of people like this working with you, it just gives you favor. And that's why I love what the Democrats do. You all make sure we have funding to take care of people in Flint, Michigan. You made sure we have funding to take care of people when they had the problems in the Bahamas, when we had the problems in Carolina, Tennessee in the midst of COVID. We had people like you and Rob Coleman and other people on city council support. And we sent 3 trucks to Tennessee in the midst of COVID when they had a situation that was going on. And this is why I love working with you and the Democratic Party because you all make sure that we use funds to help people. And so when you hear people trying to take away affirmative action, you're taking away loan forgiveness, but you'll bail out billion-dollar airlines and think that's okay, but won't bail out the middle-class person that's scraping to do what they do, that's working in nonprofit organizations or working as teachers who get paid well below what they should be paid, and to be able to work a certain amount of time and get those loans canceled. So, I mean, I know that's at stake. That's why I was like, what can we do to help you?
If you just look at the difference between the big initiative, his signature issue, tax cut for the rich. That's about all he did in 4 years. Top 1% in corporations got 80% of that bill. The big bill, first bill that under the Biden administration, the American Rescue Plan Act, it had the child tax credit. So people could get $300 per month per child, helping them. You talk about inflation. Well, that does something about inflation. When you go to the grocery store, you got more money to buy your groceries with. It had, you mentioned bailing out struggling people. 1 million people were caught up in the multi-employer pension fund, and those funds were going south. They were going insolvent. And this is simple arithmetic. You look at the number of years and all that, you do the arithmetic, they were failing plans. Not anybody's fault. You had bankruptcies and corporate bankruptcies. You had the stock collapse that people never recovered from, and they're going south. I was on a committee for a year to see what we could do about it. Democrats offered all kinds of things. Okay, well, if you cut the benefits a little bit, you might be able to save them. If you increase the premiums, you can save them. All kinds of things you could do to try to save. Republicans, crickets. American Rescue Plan comes and said, well, we ought to try to save these plans. And one of the things I made them calculate is, okay, if the plans fail, what's the impact on the federal budget? Because people are going to be using more SNAP benefits. They're going to be using more Medicaid. They're going to be paying less taxes. This is going to have an effect of $170 billion first 10 years and more than that going out. So when we came up with a solution that only costs about $85 or $90 billion, that's less than we're on the hook for. And so we just put it in the rescue plan. And then we looked up, Republicans weren't looking for it. We said, well, forget about all those cuts and benefits. These people have worked hard all their lives and earned this thing. Let them get what they earned. As a matter of fact, some plans had agreed to cuts and had paid less benefits. You say, well, that's not fair. Let's make those up so you got to check for the benefits you'd lost. That's the kind of concern you have with Democrats. The stimulus checks, and all of that, but the stimulus checks, the child tax credit, enhanced SNAP benefits. If you lose your job, a lot of people were making more sitting on the sofa than they were working. By the end of the year, child poverty had been cut almost 50%. Record number of jobs created. Very low unemployment. The program worked. And all you heard from the Republicans is bad economy and it's Biden's fault. They didn't lift a finger to do anything, and all they're doing is complaining. But that's the kind of tax cuts for the rich, 80% of top 1% in corporations, and going helping people. As a matter of fact, in terms of when you see a problem, Democrats and Republicans look at them differently. Democrats look at a problem as something to solve and make life better for people. Republicans look at a problem as something to weaponize and achieve political benefit from by complaining about it and then blaming the Democrats. Let me give you a prime example, the border. They've been whining about the border. They had a Republican bill in the Senate. It was bipartisan, but basically a Republican bill. Senator Langford, a Republican from Oklahoma, primary author. Democrats didn't like it, but it would help the situation at the border, so most of us agreed to it. But before they could vote on it, Trump said, now kill the bill. If you pass the bill, you may solve the problem, and we won't have anything to complain about. They said it out loud. Wow. And so what did they do? Kill the bill. Then what's the next thing they do? Complain about the problem and blame it on. And so what they do? They impeach the Secretary of Homeland Security. They pass a resolution condemning the Vice President, and they kill the bill. And Democrats are still here trying to solve the problem to help people. Inflation. Like I said, the American Rescue Plan Act put all that money in your pocket. So when inflation hit, you had money to pay your bills. At the end of the year, child poverty went down, jobs were created, credit card delinquencies, lowest in 30 years.
Wow.
Okay. We solved, we had a problem, we dealt with it. Republicans, when they say inflation, they just complain about it and then blame somebody. What's the Republican plan to deal with inflation? Thank you.
I thought you were going to tell me.
Thank you. No, you just said it.
That was a good setup.
You just said it. You just said, Their solution is to complain about it, blame it on Biden.
Wow.
And do nothing. And the problem is that when a politician is complaining about a problem, you assume they're doing something about it. Well, no, not Republicans. They find the problem, they complain about it, and blame the Democrats, achieve political advantage. I don't know if you saw the rally in Philadelphia when Tim Walz came on and just said, "You've brought joy back to politics." What he meant, and you could see it, Democrats enjoy creating jobs. Democrats enjoy reducing your drug prices and your health care costs. Republicans enjoy finding a problem and complaining about it.
And that's what I appreciate. Like I said, I, with In Touch, New Beach Grove, you all definitely support churches to me more so than some of your counterparts as far as helping us help people. And my job is to help people. And so I want people in the office who really want to help serve people. Yes, I don't disagree with trying to help people with tax write-offs because I enjoy tax write-offs for what I do with real estate. But I also want to make sure my main job, the main vision I want to see is helping people who may need help to help themselves. Because when you help people, like we with Natasha House, we partner with Natasha House, Maxwell Realty, we partner with them, and these women are homeless, and they go into the Natasha House, and they stay there for up to 2 years. They get them a strategic plan, and we help them get rental property or help them buy homes. And the thing about it is, who I partner with a lot of times and get funding from will be individuals who are in power or in politics. Most of the time it's Democrats. So who am I going to try to put in office? Democrats, because they help us help people. I want to help people. I felt so bad for what Chris Christie, what is it? What's that? Man, I get it right on my tongue. Up north. What state was he?
New Jersey?
New Jersey. I keep seeing the J in my mind. When he asked Obama to help his state and the Democrats and the Republicans turned their back on him because he wanted the president to give him federal aid for his state. And they got mad because they felt like that may have helped Obama get in office. I'm like, why would you want him to sacrifice his entire state because of some type of political?
Because that's who they are.
That is crazy.
No. That's who they are. Look at Medicaid expansion. It took us many years, and we finally got Medicaid expanded to cover a lot of people, several 100,000 people in Virginia. There are states that have not expanded Medicaid. Now, let's do some arithmetic. First of all, in Virginia, we covered hundreds of thousands of people. Because there's a 90% match, if you give a doctor $1, he's going to give you 6 cents back in income tax and goes spends it 6 cents in sales tax. Shoot, you got $1 and 2 cents back just giving them the dollar. So there's virtually no cost to it. Rural hospitals cannot survive without Medicaid expansion. Too many people come and can't pay, and the business model does not work. Rural hospitals were closing right and left. And how stupid is it not to, and what kind of campaign are you running when you don't expand? When I tell you that if you have insurance, and somebody goes and doesn't pay, how does the bill get paid? Well, they charge you a little extra. So you're paying a little extra, and your premium is a little higher because they don't have coverage. So let me tell you what the campaign against Medicaid expansion sounds like. One, we're not going to make profit on the money. We're going to let rural hospitals close, and we're going to raise your premiums, and just to make sure that those people don't get Medicaid coverage.
Wow.
And I think some people say, well, actually, if that's the case, why don't you give them some coverage and lower my premiums?
Right.
The bill that in Virginia that had Medicaid expansion had extra money in it. I think the ports of Virginia got some extra money, economic development, because it made a profit. You're covering things that, Community Services Board, people getting mental health services. Well, 90% of the people just provide the services. Now, virtually everybody who doesn't have insurance is eligible for a Medicaid card. You give them a Medicaid card. the federal government pays 90% of the bill. Money you didn't have.
Wow.
So how do you justify not expanding Medicaid? Because it's Obamacare.
They the one called it Obamacare.
Well,
the crazy thing, they didn't think it was gonna work.
It didn't work because people figured out and I told people if Obama didn't want to call Obamacare, call it Scott Care. When you go to the emergency room and say, "Oh Lord, I couldn't pay this bill. Thank God for Scott Care." I mean, when you go to college, I couldn't go to college but for a Pell Grant. Claiborne Pell, senator from Rhode Island, authored the bill. Thank you, Senator Pell.
Yes.
And I'd be everybody in the emergency room saying, "Thank you, Bobby Scott."
Yeah.
but he got it. It's Obamacare, not Scott Care. I voted for it.
Yeah.
But how do you justify not expanding Medicaid on a state level? Now you can say you might not want to do it on a federal level because we're paying the bill, but for a state legislator and a state governor, how do you not make a profit, keep rural hospitals open, reduce everybody's premium just to make sure that hundreds of thousands of people don't get coverage? Try to explain that to somebody.
Yeah, so what is the motive? You just don't want to help people? I mean,
no, because it's called Obamacare, and the politics of it, they'd rather complain about the Obama part of it, and they've taken polls. Do you support or oppose Obamacare? I'm against it. Do you support or oppose the Affordable Care Act? I'm for it. Same thing.
right.
And
I saw a guy interviewing
Jimmy Kimmel, the late night talk show host, was man in the street.
Yes, exactly.
And they were saying, that Obamacare bad. Affordable Care Act, yeah, I think that's a good idea. I mean, just run after the other. It's the same. It's the same bill, different name.
Wow.
And they will deny people their health care coverage. And some of this is life-saving because you get free prevention, no copay or deductible. And so you can discover things early when they're curable rather than late when it's too late.
Wow. So because somebody else is getting credit for it, they actually helped put it together.
And so you talk about Democrats and Republicans, it's essentially a party line vote on Obamacare.
Jesus.
We didn't have a single Republican, House or Senate, on final passage. You had one, on the first go-round, you had one Republican who represented a majority black district vote for it. But then they beat him down so much when it came final passage, he switched and voted no.
For people's health. And they wonder why. See, I have to take care of people. That's my job as a public servant. That's my job as a pastor. That's my job as a minister. I just don't understand it. So I know a lot of people are going to be upset. Hey, whatever. That's just how it goes. I know you have to go, but let us, I guess, give us some closing statement. What do we need to do in order to make this country great for once?
Well,
hey, you know what I'm saying? Because I don't know what you're trying to take me back. We got to get a clip of Kranz. I'm going to give it to you. Is a white actor. He was talking about, so when you trying to take us back to? He sounded just like us. So I don't understand. When was it great?
Because Make America Great Again suggested that there is a time in the past when we want to go back to. I am amazed. The first election for Trump, nobody thought he was going to win, so nobody paid any attention to him. But since they have used this as a slogan, I think it's incumbent upon the media to get out of them, what are they talking about? Name the date. So we get a sense of their vision for America. And like I said, it's before 1970s, it's before because of Roe v. Wade, 60s, the civil rights bills, including the Voting Rights Act, before 1954, because as judges won't say whether or not segregated schools were a good idea or a bad idea. I mean, how far back, you just assume that they would not acknowledge something before 1865. You assume that they wouldn't, even if that's what they believe, they wouldn't say it. But exactly what are they talking about? We're trying to go forward. And I think Vice President Harris in her campaign has said, we're not going back. We're not going back. We're going to go forward. And we have a lot of things on the table. We're creating jobs. Under the Biden administration, the first 2 years, he created more jobs in 2 years than any president had done in a 4-year term. And before the end of the year, he would have created more jobs in less than 4 years than any Republican president, regardless of how many terms they served.
Wow.
He's the only one we're behind right now is Reagan, and we're going to eclipse Reagan around October, November. We're going to eclipse that. Clinton,
In 4 years.
Clinton, in 8 years did more. If Biden had 8 years, he'd get that, but he's not going to get it before the end of 4 years. But he would have beaten every Republican president in job creation, whether they served 1 year or 2.
One term.
I mean, we need to continue working on jobs. Healthcare, we're reducing the premiums on Obamacare. We're reducing drug prices. Limited insulin at $35 a month. Some we're paying hundreds of dollars a month. Next year, you're going to get capped at $2,000 out of pocket, $2,000 out of pocket for this is seniors.
Yes.
$2,000 out of pocket for drug costs. Now, some people, if they got serious pharmaceuticals that they'd have to take, some of them pay $2,000 first month.
Wow.
After that, no more copays and deductible the rest of the year. I mean, there are a lot of things that we are doing. We're improving, fighting climate change, enforcing civil rights. I mean, there's so many things that we need to continue to keep fighting on. You mentioned Flint, Michigan. Most people know that the infrastructure bill, you had infrastructure week under Trump for 4 years, and then Biden comes in, you have an infrastructure legislation, roads, bridges, tunnels, airports, ports. We got all that money. Broadband, got some of that too. One thing they don't mention very often, money to get rid of lead pipes.
Right.
And you talked about Flint, Michigan.
Didn't come up at all.
Well, we put it in there.
Oh,
we didn't talk about it a lot.
That's
We
what
just
I'm
stuck it in there because a lot of children are victims of lead because of lead pipes. It's permanently diminished opportunities, and we're getting rid of the lead pipes. Now, who puts that in an infrastructure bill? Somebody that cares about children.
But see, we got to help them. We got to help our Democrats. You know, I'm going to tell you why we need to help you out. The Republicans are always talking. But the way I get funding is I talk about what I do because I need to talk about it. Yeah, we got to take some cameras in there and help them get their word out. Because that right there, I definitely was thinking about that. Like when we first helped Flint, Michigan, I was like, well, when they gonna change the daggone pipes? Because that's what's killing everybody. No matter how much water I send, when they take a bath or if they turn on their water, is and to say that, yeah, it's still being humble, sir. But you just got to get the word out so people can know what to vote for. It's still being humble, but you got to put the word out there. The Bible says, would you put your candle under a bush? It said, no, you let your light shine. So you all need to let your light shine. You got to put the word out there. Nobody knows. They only hear the complaints of the Democrats. It is not being arrogant when you put out what you're doing, because you have to put out what you're doing so people can vote. And it's a simple thing. That is so simple. And sometimes Trump, no offense, he tries to attract a lot of simple-minded people, and he just gives them those sound bites. I had a Republican that I interviewed one time. We started talking about the critical race theory, and I told him it's not black history, it's the theory of why racism existed. Why did you have redlining? Why? And when he sat there, I realized he didn't know. I said, see, you all need to educate yourself. You can't just go out here and listen to the sound bites of your leaders and you not go back and research what it is. And the funny thing about it, me talking about critical race theory, you know what they put on my wall? They put explicit, like he was violent. And so I had to appeal it and get that taken off because it wasn't violent. I'm just telling the truth, because a lot of times Republicans and people don't want the truth out there because those sound bites are what gets them elected. So we have to start putting out, hey, look, the Democrats getting rid of lead pipes. Hey, look, the Democrats are trying to make sure that we reduce your Medicaid, and now $2,000. Do you understand that's over the whole year that you don't have to pay more than $2,000 of Medicare, Medicaid out of your pocket?
We're trying to do that for everybody.
For everybody.
But the Republicans blocked it. So we can only do it.
And we got to say they blocked it. We don't never say anything.
We can only do it for senior citizens at $35 insulin.
I'm finna appoint myself as the
the negotiated drug prices.
I'm gonna appoint myself as y'all social media person to make sure y'all get y'all daggone word out there. That's the problem. We don't say anything. We hear the Republicans all day.
Well, that's because we're so busy doing it. They are so busy complaining about it. We're so busy solving the problems.
You got to be busy
doing
it, but you got to be busy
you're right.
saying it.
You're right. We should,
I say it for you, man.
As we solve the problems, we're to talk about it.
Yeah, boom, put it out there.
But our joy is in solving the problem.
I get you, but your joy is going to have to be, it's going to be.
You're right.
Stop if we can't get y'all in office.
You're right.
So it's a necessary evil. Anyway, y'all see how humble my congressman is? I have to tell him. So I'm going to make sure we put stuff like this out there. I'm going to make sure I bug him once a quarter or something. I got to bring him on so he can tell y'all everything he does so he can help himself, which he always, he going to win. God loves him. But I need to make sure that you all understand what goes on. Some people don't know that affordable health care, this was I'm not even talking about Jimmy Kimmel. The guy was on live on Fox some years ago when Obamacare was getting its roots. And he said, I hate Obamacare. And they said, but you know that's the affordable care, right? Did you know that the Obamacare is affordable care? One of his friends told him while he was live on the news. And he said, oh no, I like that. He said, I can't do this interview no more. And it's live. They didn't put out that much, but it was live on Fox. And the guy realized, hold on, I do like affordable. And he said, dude, you know that's the Obamacare is affordable care, for real? And he just, I can't do this interview. He didn't know because they're not educated. They just go by the sound bites. And so we have to put it out what you all are doing. If we really got out what you all were doing, it wouldn't be any competition. And I know you're busy doing, but we have to be busy putting the word out there at the same time. So that's my 2 cents. All right. Anyway, we're with our favorite Congressman Scott, who makes sure that our education, colleges, minority colleges, and other colleges are funded. He does so much for us. So when you go to the polls, this is not a New Beach Grove podcast. This is my podcast. So when you go vote, do the right thing and vote for my dude, Congressman Bobby Scott.